Katrina, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. And I know you have such a big impact, not just here in Australia, but all over the world. So I'm really grateful to you for having me on.
Oh, well, I'm so blessed for you setting aside this time and really allowing me to dive into your journey and your story and find out more about what makes you you and what makes you confident. So just to get started, I'd love for you to share with us, where did it all start?
Well, if we go right back, I always thought that confidence was my superpower right from when I was a little kid. I used to be that child putting on concerts for the neighbours on the front lawn of my home. I used to always be first to get up on stage and do any kind of public speaking competition. I was debating against university students when I was in grade 8. Like, I was just that kid, always getting up, any opportunity to be in the limelight. So it probably didn't come as a great surprise that I was really drawn towards broadcasting. I'm a television journalist and a TV newsreader now. And that was something that I always wanted to do right from when I was 7 years old, and I was doing work experience from when I was 12 at Parliament House in Canberra. So for me, confidence was something that I didn't have to think about and something I just relied upon heavily up until about 4 years ago, when I was going through a divorce. So I was going through a very stressful personal time. My divorce was quite amicable. However, I have 2 children, and I think, for anyone who's separating a family, you lose friendships. It's not an easy time. And so when you're not dealing with stress, and I was really sweeping it under the carpet and carrying on business as usual, stress has a funny way of biting you where it hurts the most to get you to pay attention. And so for me, what that meant was, when I was reading the news, the television news on our highest rating night of the week, I had a full-blown panic attack. So the way that happened was, I was sitting at the news desk and I read the news on my own, and it's for a full hour. And as I've got like a robot voice counting down in my ear, the little earpiece, and as it started to count down from 10, I couldn't breathe. My heart started racing. I just wanted to rip out my earpiece, rip off my microphone and get out of there. And I knew that I couldn't. I then had to read off the auto cue the main headlines, and then I had to say good evening with the camera on me and introduce the first story before I could get off camera and the tape would start rolling. I honestly couldn't talk. I don't know how I got through it, but I managed to say good evening. And then I read off the auto cue the very last line, skipping 3 paragraphs, the very last line, so that the director knew to roll the tape. And he just said to me, "What happened? Did the auto cue fail?" And I said, "No, I think I've had a panic attack." So I had to get through the next hour of live television. The director was just beautiful, and he talked me through, every story. He'd do breathing exercises with me. And so that's how I got through that hour. But after that, my confidence was absolutely shaken. And for anyone who's had a panic attack, it's not uncommon for you to develop anxiety around having another one. So all the triggers of driving to work, parking my car in the car park, walking into the hair and makeup room, walking into the studio, all the things that, this was my dream job. I loved doing this stuff, but it became torturous, and I would get that feeling like I was about to have another panic attack again. So I had a choice. I was like, well, I could leave the job and walk away, or I could really dig deep and relearn everything that I thought I knew about confidence. Being a journalist and being a bit of a research nerd, I decided to immerse myself in the science of confidence and what it takes to rewire those neural pathways. So I've done a lot of reading, I've done therapy, I've also done meditation, I've attacked it from a spiritual point of view as well. So I'm happy to say 3.5 years on, I wouldn't say that I've arrived, because what I've learned is that you never arrive, but I work on it every day, and I now view the fear in a completely different way. So yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah. Huge gift and huge journey. Like I love though how sometimes the universe like puts these things in our place for us to grow us in such a huge way, but almost redirect us in a whole new path. Like if that hadn't have happened, where do you feel that you'd be now?
Honestly, it's funny you say that, because who knows, but I think the life that I was living before that moment and the life that I'm living now are like chalk and cheese. And that was a huge wake up call. That was the universe hitting me across the face with a wet fish. And talk about hitting me where it hurt. I think probably I had been getting little wake up calls up until that point, but I had been ignoring them. And it took me to potentially walk away from the job that I love the most. Like every time I sit in the studio reading the news, I pinch myself because I love it so much. And it was my dream as a little girl to do this. So to have my confidence shaken so badly was perhaps the only way that I was forced to look at a lot of truths about how I was dealing with fear and the way that I was talking to myself about things that were hard and getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, huge. And oh my goodness, there's so many different correlations that we can go down, because we have like almost like the correlation of what's happening now with COVID. And I feel like that's been a huge wake up call for a lot of people to realize that their life that they've been living beforehand probably wasn't serving them the best it could be, or there was habits that weren't serving them they really need to look at to change the life to then decide what they want to be now. But then it's also like, without that experience for you, do you feel that you would be able to educate the women that you now support in confidence the way that you do now?
Well, honestly, Christine, I'd never thought that I'd be doing this, because for me, having wanted to be a journalist since the age of 7, that was it for me. That's all I ever could see myself doing. And it wasn't even intentional that I set out to educate other women in this way. Initially, it was pure selfishness. I just wanted to get better myself. I wanted to get over this hurdle and this anxiety and put myself out there more confidently and figure out what true confidence was and how to get more of it. Because I am a newsreader, I get asked to do a lot of public speaking and MC work. Initially, after I had the panic attack, that was the last thing that I wanted to do. But I decided that it was like, getting back on the horse or back on the bicycle, that I would say yes to every single opportunity that came my way. So I was doing a lot of speaking throughout this process of figuring out how to rebuild my confidence. And after I would do these big talks, I would have a lot of women come up to me saying, gosh, you look so confident up there. I wish I could do that, because I need to be able to speak for my job. How do you do what you do? Is there any chance you could teach me? So eventually I started doing some one-on-one, and then I got asked to do a workshop, and then, I did an online course. And it's just funny how, it's funny, now I think life is about following the breadcrumbs, and I just followed the breadcrumbs, and here we are.
I love that. I actually say that all the time. Like, it's always about just following the breadcrumbs of joy to find what lights you up, and then things happen, right? Like the universe just starts to deliver new experiences for us to really find where our passion is or where our purpose is in life. And I love that you just said that. That's amazing. But I can't imagine like that it was all a smooth journey, because I can't imagine that you went from, I can't imagine what it would have been like interviewing politicians in Canberra, but then also to step up and now be, in such a national, on stage and on camera all the time. That wasn't an easy journey to get there. What were some of the biggest challenges that you had to become the newsreader that you are today?
It was dogged determination. And I think one of the things that I've discovered with confidence is you've got to find your why, and you've also got to make it bigger than you are. Now, in terms of my personal career ambitions, that was my huge why. And I never had to question that because it's something that I've always wanted. So behind having to cold call news directors and ask them for opportunities, which was tough. In fact, I was only talking to another journalist about that today, how I would be so nervous before I would make those calls that I would literally script out, hello, my name is Katrina Blowers and I've just graduated from, so that's what I would do in order to get the courage to make sure that I got my messaging exact. But my why was always bigger than me. I knew that this was such a burning desire that I would just do whatever it took. I would work for free, which I did a lot of. I would get mentors. So, I approached women who were where I wanted to be and asked them to help me out. So I was doing a lot of those things, but it just came naturally back then. And now I suppose the confidence that I put behind things is much more intentional.
Yeah, beautiful. So what were some of the things that really surprised you? So after the panic attack happened, and then you started to look into how do we develop confidence, and what are some of the strategies that we need to put in place to become confident? What were some of the surprising things that you discovered?
I guess, the biggest surprise is that people who I put up on a pedestal as having invincible confidence, no one really has it. And in interviewing people who, because I interviewed a lot of people to try and get their confidence tips and tricks, they all have, imposter syndrome. And these are people like, for example, I spoke to Julie Bishop, who used to be Australia's foreign minister. She suffered from imposter syndrome. She would do things like wear certain outfits. She has a collection of brooches. So she would wear like particular brooches for particular meetings to try and channel that inner confidence.
Wow.
Something that you can do, that's a little tip for you, is you can use a confidence prop. So for example, I have a fancy pen, you can see it's got glitter in it, and I take it onto the news desk, and if I'm feeling nervous, what I'll do is I'll hold my pen and I will channel my nerves into my pen. So, and this is another trick that I give executive women too, who often struggle with when they're presenting at a meeting, what to do with their hands. I'll say, bring along your lucky pen. And then when you are talking and looking around the room, you can make your hand gestures and bring your hands back to your pen, and then make another hand gesture and bring it back to your pen. So you look like you're in control, but you're also doing, because body language is another big part of looking more confident than you actually are. And open hand gestures are like a sign that I'm in control. You can trust me. I've got nothing to hide. So use your lucky pen, use your open hand gestures, and bring your hands back to your pen.
Love that, because you're so right. It's like there's the verbal techniques of confidence and the way that you use your voice. And then there's also the non-verbal, right, which is your body language, which is huge. And so I would love to know, what are some of the tips that you, with everybody that's going through COVID at the moment, and I think with lots of changes that have been happening with the way that we do present, and whether we speak, whether it's for speakers or whether it's just for business owners that are showing up on socials more now than what they were in person, what are some of the tools or tips or tricks that you could give someone for how they can show up more powerfully in their confidence?
Yeah, so the big one, I suppose, is you need to show up. I was talking to someone the other day, and she was saying how when she does Zoom meetings with her team, she'll say hello and then she'll switch off her camera because she hates being on camera so much. I bet. And I get it. Like, I actually, even though I'm on television for a living, I don't particularly love doing Instagram stories because I feel it feels out of my comfort zone. It's something that I'm I'm working on. But, you know, it doesn't come naturally to everyone to be on camera, but particularly if you're in a work setting, it's important as a woman in particular to be seen. It's the equivalent of taking a seat at the table for a meeting. So if you switch your camera off, you're not going to be as visible, and showing up, I think, is particularly important, even if you're feeling weird inside. But there are definitely some things you can do. I think if anyone can see us right now, or if you're listening, I'll explain. Christine and I have got our camera on our laptop at our eye level. That is so important. And I can't begin to tell you the number of people who I've interviewed, because we're doing a lot of Zoom interviews now for TV news. Politicians who should know better, they've got their camera angled up their nose, and it just looks dreadful. Or they've got a window behind them so that, you know, it looks like a halo of light behind their head. Set up your camera at your eye level, put a shoebox underneath your laptop if you need to, and set it so that you've got natural light on your face. And given that I think we're going to be in this kind of limbo land for a while, where we're going to need to do a lot of this kind of online stuff, invest in a ring light. They're so great. And there's also a setting on Zoom that does a bit of a face smoothing feature. So these are just little
that.
help you put your best foot forward if you need to. The other thing is, with your clothing, take a look at what TV presenters wear. If you're giving an important presentation and you want people's focus and attention to be on what you're saying rather than what you're wearing, look at people like TV presenters and politicians. They wear like a nice solid colour. They don't have lots of busy patterns. They don't have big crazy earrings, unless that's your personal
yeah.
it can be really distracting. So they're just a couple of little tips.
Yeah, awesome. And I imagine that, you know, a lot of people struggle with Instagram stories for sure. And I think that I love that you just shared that about Julie Bishop, that she also experiences the imposter syndrome, because I find that that's one of the surprising things with the work that I do, is that a lot of people think that, well, because I suffer from the imposter syndrome, that means that that belief around not being good enough or not being qualified enough is true. But it's really not the case. That even Julie Bishop, in the position that she's in, that she still experiences that. Like, no matter what level you are, and not that there is levels, but no matter where you are in what presence that you show up, that you can absolutely experience the imposter syndrome. So are you able to share, like, have you experienced that before, and how have you overcome it?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've really learned to tune into is my self-talk. And I would say that would be the biggest change between pre-panic attack Katrina and now, is that I can recognize those unhelpful stories that I'm telling myself when I'm pushing out of my comfort zone. And there's a reason why we tell ourselves these stories. It's because our brain is trying to keep us safe. Our brain is just doing its job. So we need to, first of all, have awareness around the stories that we're telling ourselves. We need to catch those thoughts, because feelings are not facts, and those stories, they're just conditioned stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over again. And the more that we tell ourselves those stories, the stronger and the more ingrained those neural pathways are going to be in our brain. So you can catch yourself when you're telling yourself a story such as, I'm not good at doing Instagram stories. What will people think of me? They're all going to laugh at me. What have I got to say that people want to listen to? Catch yourself, and just, instead of ignoring it or trying to brush it under the carpet, you say, well, hang on a second, is this really true for me? And is this actually a helpful thought? And going back to your why, is this going to push me forward? Is this going to move the needle forward for me achieving my why? Or is this going to keep me stuck where I am? And it's, I think, one of the things that I used to think about confidence was that it was an absence of fear. I used to think, because I never used to get stage fright, I used to think that being confident meant being able to stand up on stage and not feeling the fear. But I've come to learn that it's about feeling the fear, and, you know, to use that that expression, doing it anyway, and reframing the fear and choosing to see it as excitement, that you're living your life on purpose and doing something really awesome.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that a lot of people can have the belief system around, same with confidence and same with fear, right? Like they think that some people just don't have it. Some people just are confident and some people just aren't. Whereas that's not really the case, right? You can absolutely develop confidence. You can absolutely develop the ability to reframe the fear and work through it and challenge yourself to move through it. Has there been a challenging time that you feel that you've been able to tap into that confidence to overcome that fear?
Look, it's a daily work in progress for me, but I might tell you about a moment where I had a bit of a setback on my journey, and it kind of it demonstrates the unhelpful stories that we tell ourselves. I was asked to speak at a big gathering. It was lots of very senior members of a few law and accounting firms. There were members of the Chinese government there. It was a big deal. And they were also, this is the key, they were also paying me a lot of money. Now, when I saw how much money they were paying me, instead of feeling like, woohoo, this is amazing. And also instead of backing myself as, well, actually, I've spent decades, refining myself as a speaker, and I'm actually really good at this, and that's why they've asked me to do it. I got really intimidated, and I started telling myself, I'm not worthy of this much money. What if I make a mistake? They'll all be looking at me, expecting me to be at this level, and what if I can't perform? And I was really white-anting my own performance. That's actually, and I haven't had a panic attack since then. That was when my second panic attack happened, when I was up on stage. And afterwards, I sat and I really thought about, why did I let myself do that? And what were those stories that I was telling myself? And that was the kind of second wake-up call to get really still and clear about that messaging, and stopping those thoughts and trying to switch my thinking to more helpful ones instead.
The way that we speak to ourselves is so powerful. And if anybody, like, this is the thing I think that a lot of people don't realize, is that they think that they just have that, but it's actually the thought pattern that creates the emotional response, right? So it's like, if anybody had said to themselves the same things that you had said to yourself multiple times, and then, believed it, and then we have an emotional response to it, no wonder it would create anxiety and a panic attack, right? Like, it's just the body freaking out and going into fear and thinking it's going to die. Like,
Which you genuinely feel at the time, but yeah, you'll be okay.
So is there anything that you do after such an event, or other events that you've actually done well and you've walked away from it gone, that was incredible? Like, is there anything that you do to help bolster the confidence for next time?
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple of things that I do. One of them is visualizing. So this is a really powerful tool that you can use to create new neural pathways in your brain and strengthen the ones that are going to be helpful for your confidence journey. So now when I've got a big event like that, I sit there and I visualize to the detail, like I play a mental movie in my mind of that event going really, really well. And I tap into the feeling of what it's going to be like to be on stage, even with some nervous butterflies. And I imagine myself looking out at the crowd. And as I'm doing that, I physically smile, because smiling, it changes the biochemistry in your body and it lights your cells up. And your brain can't actually tell the difference between visualization and reality, between a thought and reality. That's why we have panic attacks when we think of scary things or think of going out of our comfort zone. So visualization is definitely a great thing for me to do. And I even imagine myself in the outfit that I'm going to wear at that particular event. The other thing is I now am really mindful about creating endorphins and getting rid of cortisol, which you can do. So on a day where I'm doing something that's out of my comfort zone, speaking at a big event or whatever it is that I'm going to do, and I start feeling the nerves, I'll go to the gym, or I'll go for a walk around the block. I'll do something where I get really hot and sweaty. That does two things. First of all, it gets rid of the cortisol levels in your body. You can physically get rid of it. And it also creates endorphins. And meditating, if you don't have time to exercise, meditating for 20 minutes actually creates the same level of endorphins as going to the gym. So that's
such good strategies, especially before a speaking gig, for sure. Is there anything else that you would suggest when it comes to the difference between engaging or influencing, probably is a better word, compared to being on Zoom, compared to being in a room? Like, what would you say would be different of creating that influence when you're in a room with a group of people?
Yeah, that's a really good one, actually. I do find that it is tough to create that same level of engagement on Zoom. You really do have to put aside the extra time, I think, to talk and make those connections. In a room, look, a lot of people who are fearful speakers will stand behind the lectern and grip onto it for dear life. If that works for you, it's all about baby steps. So if that is the thing that is going to get you up on stage and saying yes to a speaking gig to begin with, by all means, do it. And I give some strategies in my course for standing behind a lectern and making eye contact with people all around the room, and what size font to even print out your speaking notes in, and how to mark them up so that when you're looking down, because a lot of people struggle with memorizing a speech as well, which, eventually that's where you want to get to, is speaking without notes. But I talk you through how to mark out your script so you can look down at your lectern and look up again without losing your place. But ultimately, you do want to either be at the same level as your audience by sitting down at a chair if you can, or by standing out with a handheld microphone, or even hands-free. But it's all about being on the same level as your audience, telling a story so that you are showing, not telling, whatever it is that you want to resonate with your audience. Because a fact is, if you tell a fact within a story, your audience is 22 times more likely to remember it. So that's the power of storytelling. And you should always have your best 3 stories ready to go. So that's something that I work on a lot with people, is getting their 3 stories and nailing those, and then they can repurpose them in any situation.
I love that. When you've got those go-to stories that always get your point across, makes it so much easier, isn't it? Because I love the way that our brain has the ability to hold on to stories much more powerfully than just a fact, right? And that makes it so much easier, not only for the speaker, but also for the people listening to remember it as well.
Definitely. You can do the same thing in a Zoom meeting as well. The power of story will resonate no matter the format. And same with Instagram stories, as you know. You're good at Instagram stories, Christine.
Thank you. I do try, but I'm the same as anybody else. I go through days where I'm just like, I can't show my face on stories today. Like, I just can't do it.
I feel you.
Is there anything that you find that you have people ask you about confidence that you find interesting, or that you find that they really struggle with?
Look, imposter syndrome, I would say, is the biggest one, particularly for women. And surprisingly, a lot of women really resist putting themselves forward for opportunities when they don't feel completely qualified. That's something I'm really passionate about changing. I read a statistic that said that Australian women suffer from some of the lowest confidence in the Western world. Only 26% of Australian women say that they feel confident on any given day. That just makes me feel so sad, because I think about all of the missed opportunities that they're not saying yes to because they don't feel confident enough. Men have a very different outlook on confidence than women do. Men tend to think that they don't need to feel confident in order to say yes to an opportunity. There was HP, Hewlett Packard did a study where they were looking at why they didn't have more women in their executive team, and they found that women would only apply for new opportunities when they felt 100% qualified, and men only felt like they needed to be 60% qualified. So it comes back to self-belief. And that's a conversation that I really want to become more involved with going forward. I'm really passionate about closing that confidence gap.
Same. I think that is insane, right? Like insane that women just think that, oh, well, because I'm not 100% qualified in this, I shouldn't even give it a go. Like they're not even trying. That really like upsets me as well.
We'll probably date this podcast, but did you see the great memes that were going around because Kanye West
Yes.
is for president, and you think, well, that's true. Like he's not qualified, but he's giving it a go. Donald Trump wasn't really qualified either, but
Right. It's so true. And I was actually speaking to a group about PR, about female business owners, about stepping into and going after more PR opportunities, and just talking about that imposter syndrome, because we so struggle with it, and just being able to confidently go, this is how I am unique, or this is how I'm different, and this is my opinion on this situation. And so many women really struggle with it, yet we need so many more of women to step up and actually share and be a part of the conversation. And I love the way that Denise Duffield Thomas speaks about how, like, it's just about contributing. It doesn't mean that you have to be an expert on the conversation or an expert on the topic. But if you want to contribute, why can't we just be contributors? Like,
and that is so I have like the 4 big confidence killers, and the biggest one for women is that perfectionism paralysis. And we, much more so than men, feel as though we can't put anything out into the world, including ourselves, until it is absolutely perfect. And Elizabeth Gilbert, in her book Big Magic, which is a fantastic book for any creatives, I really recommend it. She's got a whole chapter on perfectionism and how to get over it in a creative sense. And she says that, there are people who think the Sistine Chapel is gaudy. So get yourself out there, because there's always going to be critics of your work, and you're never going to avoid that by constantly working on something until it is perfect.
Absolutely. And I think we also struggle with a lot of the rejection as well, like the fear of the rejection, even though sometimes that doesn't even come, like, especially in like early stages of business, some people hold themselves back because of that fear, but yet often it's so well received because we've never put anything else out before. It's so interesting to me to see that happen. Do you have any tools or strategies, the way that you've handled rejection in the past?
Yeah, I used to really struggle from rejection, more so based around what other people thought of me. And I did an exercise just recently where I actually wrote down, well, who is it? Who are these people whose opinions I'm letting hold me back? And it wasn't even anyone in particular, but other women who I've done this with. When they really think about it, it tends to only be 1 or 2 people. And sometimes it's people within their own family. And when you put a name to the people who are actually holding you back, or these faceless critics, it's again all about the stories you're telling yourself. You're like, well, should I really let these people hold me back from, and again, coming back to your why, making your why bigger than that.
Yeah, bigger than your fear, bigger than any little story that you're going to tell yourself, for sure.
Yeah. But I was going to say, so I've interviewed quite a lot of people, not just for my workshops, but also for my podcast, Claiming Your Confidence. And they're people who, again, from the outside looking in, who are high achievers, who other people put on a pedestal as having so-called invincible confidence, but really getting a peek behind the curtain, and they struggle with confidence too. But what separates, I think, people who pursue their dreams and step into their potential from those who let fear hold them back is A, they act with courage over confidence, and B, they're not afraid of the word no. So many people stop after getting the first no, or they see it as, validation of all of those self-worth issues. These people are not afraid of the word no. And I have to say, Brene Brown has a beautiful quote that courage is contagious. And I've taken a lot of courage away from thinking about all of these incredible people who wouldn't be where they are today had they listened to that first no. And I'm trying to think of no in a different way too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, you know, I have a huge sales background, and I think that I was constantly taught in like the no had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Like any time that I heard the no, it was actually nothing to do with me specifically as a person. It was about detaching from who I was as a person to that no. And that no could mean so many other different things, that it could be that not right now. It could mean that the value or the proposition that I was putting forward just didn't actually fit their needs. It could have been that, you know, they were really busy and they literally didn't have the headspace to listen to me at that point in time. Like, there is so many reasons why someone could say no, but yet often we make it about ourselves.
And coming at it from a spiritual level, I was having a great chat with this lady who is like a PR mastermind. You know, she's brought Zara and Victoria's Secret and Drew Barrymore to Australia. She's like the top of her game, right? And she has this beautiful spiritual approach to when she hears the word no, she kind of takes a step back and looks within and thinks, well, vibrationally, am I aligned with what I want to achieve with doing this particular thing? And so she gets her vibrations at a higher point. And she said that without fail, she always attracts the right opportunities and the right clients when she's vibrationally acting from a higher place.
Oh, that's powerful. That's really good. I love that, because it's so true. Like, often we don't realize that we went after it. Like, I'm always been a go-getter. Like, I've always been someone that before I'm even ready, I'll go after it and, you know, make it work, whatever it is. Right. And so I've gone through a huge growth pattern in regards to that this year, is about looking at where am I embodying where I want to be, and how am I aligning myself to that level of expectation of myself, or that level of opportunity. Because you're so right. Like, you have to become the person to be able to have the things that you want to have.
And it's also thinking of yourself, you know, vibrationally. If you want to have a certain opportunity or meet a certain objective in your life, then you kind of need to rise up to be the person who does those things. And so this lady was telling me that she once got a big no because she was bringing some celebrity to Australia, and she was trying to get coverage for this person, and the journalists all said no. And so she thought, well, instead of chasing it with desperate, needy energy, I'm going to sit right back and wait for them to come to me, because I know that this is a great get and this is going to be successful. And so she kind of played hard to get. And that's when people want you, right?
Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Awesome. Is there anything in particular when it comes to, actually, I would love to have you share a little bit more about your confidence masterclass, and tell us a little bit more about who that's for and what people are going to walk away with when they take that.
So, given my background is in television and speaking, and that is something that we are all required to do so much more of every day with social media. I mean, it used to be the case that unless you had a visit from someone like me with news cameras, that was your only opportunity to put yourself out there. But now we literally all have our own broadcasting platforms from our phones. So we kind of need to make the most of that. And we need to feel good about what we're putting out into the world as well. So my masterclass is primarily aimed at women and aimed at entrepreneurs or anyone who wants to play a bigger game and tell their story and really get clear on their messaging, who wants to know how to tell a good story, say if they're a podcast guest or if they're asked to be a keynote speaker or part of a panel. So I teach you how to tell your 3 best stories. We figure out how to figure out for yourself what your speaking personality is, because if you're putting, like, for example, when I first began as a journalist, I thought I was going to be like this hard hitting, you know, serious, but that's just not who I am. And so it wasn't until I figured out what was my way of connecting with people that I really began to succeed in my career. And we also go through some body language hacks that we all use in television and politicians use as well to make ourselves look much more confident than perhaps we are really feeling inside.
Amazing. It sounds incredible. Like I went and checked it all out and I'm like, I'm totally taking this course. And I think there'll be, no matter where you are, right, in your business, in your career, what it is that you want to put out to the world, I think that these types of skills can be transferable to any situation.
I'd love to tell you. So I used all of these techniques. I was coaching a lady who, it was her first role as a CEO of a big company, and she was having to do a lot of public speaking. And she used to do this thing where whenever she would grab the lectern, definitely, and never move from behind the lectern, and always reading every single word off her script. And she'd do this thing where her whole body would just curl up like a turtle because she just wanted to escape from the situation. So that was her starting point. After 6 months, she came to me and she said, I think I want to put myself out on the circuit. I'd like a recommendation for a speaking agent. And I was like, look at you go. You know, this stuff can be learned. You do have to put the work in, but confidence is a muscle. And no matter your point, you can build it.
Absolutely. And that's such a strong message to get across, because often people don't believe that it's something they think that they have, right? But absolutely a skill that you can learn. And, you know, I think it all comes with taking that action, right? Like you learn the skill, but it's about putting that into action and showing and proving to yourself that you can do it every step of the way. And I think that you've done that massively with not only just going up and putting yourself in situations where you can be rejected and get all those no's and keep going, but then also getting back up after you've had the, like, I don't know how it would have experienced that, what it would have felt to experience being on camera and having a panic attack, like, oh my God, and then to get back up and do it again and then have it happen again and then reteach yourself how to be confident is just huge. So if you're going to learn confidence from anybody, I think it's someone that's been in the trenches and overcome what you've overcome.
Television, learnt the hard way.
Right? Absolutely. And you're also launching a new podcast coming out really soon. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, you know, going back to that beautiful quote from Brené Brown, who I love, courage is contagious. And I just knew that I had learned so much from having conversations with people who I really respected and admired and getting their tips. And also it just made me feel a lot less alone. And I think there's a big thing to that. You know, if you feel like, well, other people are going through this as well, it takes away the shame. And we put so much, I think, unnecessary criticism and pile on all of this blame on ourselves from a place of shame. So I interview somebody who's high profile or has achieved something, you know, pretty special every week. And we go through their biggest confidence challenge and how they overcame it. And I have to say, people like comedian Merrick Watts, I think stand-up comedy is about the most confident thing you can do. Edwina Bartholomew, who's a television presenter, people like that who seem to have so much confidence, but they're really honest about what it takes for them to get out there every day.
Love it. I can't wait for that. That's going to be incredible. So as soon as this episode goes out, I'll make sure I put a link to the show notes and link to your course as well as to the podcast as well. So just to finish up, I would love it if you could, if there's any advice that you would have for someone, for a woman in particular that is wanting to play a bigger game in whatever she's putting herself forward for, what are some of the best advice that you'd give her to be able to step into her full confidence?
All right. So going back to what I said before about how your brain doesn't know the difference between a thought and reality, there's a way that you can game the system and hack your brain for more confidence. Everyone, I guess, would have heard of the practice of having a gratitude diary and how valuable that is. Well, I actually think that as well as doing a gratitude diary, you should also incorporate a success diary ritual into your daily practice. It just has to be 3 bullet points, and they can be little things. They don't need to be big things, but little wins that you've had, of ways that you've put yourself out there a bit more confidently each day. I know for some women, it it can be something as small as wearing a really bright colour to work. Some women don't feel confident enough to do that, or going and introducing yourself to someone who you've always admired in the office, but you've always felt a bit nervous around. Just little wins every day. And what that does is it promotes what's called a winner's effect in your brain. And you see evidence that you are the person who does this kind of thing. And it's a self-perpetuating thing. It deepens those neural pathways, and you actually have evidence on paper that you are a confident person.
Oh, I love that. That is awesome. And it's just constantly building that evidence to say that I can do hard things, right? I can put myself in those situations. And if I did that, I can do this, right? So, oh, so good. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Katrina. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. And I wish you all the best with the podcast, and cannot wait to connect and see more of what you're going to create.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you do. And thank you so much for having me on with all your incredible listeners. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.